Good afternoon, everybody. There's a severe lack of enthusiasm in the room. Good afternoon, everybody. Awesome. People will come in now and go, whoa, something cool's going on here. Awesome. Well, thanks for staying almost to the end. See, people are coming in already. It's awesome. Thanks for staying almost to the end. I know there's a session after that, after this one. My name is David Aiken. I'm a technical specialist for Windows Azure. I actually have a developer background, which is kind of weird. I was the original Windows Azure evangelist about 3.5 years ago, before we were even public. And now I actually work in sales, which feels a bit weird given my background, but I thought, hey, the only thing I haven't done is sales and marketing seemed really easy. So I decided to go into sales. Anyway. Part of what I do is dealing with customers and customer escalations and things like that. And then a lot of customers get apps deployed and then go, huh? What do we do now? So I get to kind of talk to people and say, well, this is what you should have done about 3 months ago while you were building it. And this is what you can do now to make things better. So I'm going to share a lot of the kind of things we get customers to do with you. I must say, when I originally spec'd out this talk, it was only 3 hours long. And I thought, I'm not going to get that into 60 minutes, so I better do something about it. So I kind of really focused on the core things that you have to get right, and then everything else can be built upon this. So we've got 3 parts to this talk. They're all today, so you don't have to worry that you've got to come back tomorrow or anything like that. The first thing we'll do is going to just go over deploying an application or a service to Windows Azure. And I'm going to point out some key things that you need to know. Now, just before we kind of get started, I'm going to ask some questions and things. And I think that's the next slide. So that I can figure out who's in the room. I talked to a few of you when you were coming in. Part 2, we're going to kind of find out how to look inside the Windows Azure cloud and see what's going on there. And then part 3 is making sense of that information there. So I've got some questions for you guys and gals, and you need to raise your hand on this or shout, I don't know, Windows Azure is really cool, I really like it. No. So, are you a developer? Put your hand up if you're a developer. I should have a question, are you actually awake first? But so quite a few people. Are you an IT pro? What I really mean there is you aren't a developer. Right? Okay. Do you have applications in development for Windows Azure? Awesome. Oh, that's really good. Do you have applications in production? Oh, yeah, a couple of hands went up there. Awesome. Brilliant. Okay, that just helps me kind of decide what to tell you in the next bit. So, a lot of you seem familiar with Windows Azure. However, I'm going to go over a quick overview just of some terminology, really. I'm not going to dig into tremendous depth in this section. But it's good if you understand what a deployment is and what a subscription is and what a deployment ID is. Otherwise, the rest of it doesn't make any sense. Although you could argue the rest of it doesn't make any sense anyway. So let's start off with accounts and subscriptions. So this is my favorite person in the entire world. It's the person we send the bill to. So you log on to the portal with a live ID, you create an account, and you put your credit card number in, and we'll bill you. If you're an enterprise, you can also pay by an invoice as well, so we can set up that for you. And if you didn't know we could do that, talk to your Microsoft account team, and we can get that thing set up for you, okay? Once you've got that billing account, you can create multiple subscriptions. And each subscription can have a separate Windows Live ID. So typically we find that the billing account is created by somebody in authority, perhaps even somebody in finance or with finance relations, project managers, those kind of people. It's not the dev guy. If the dev guy's created that, you've probably got the wrong thing in, okay? The devs and the production and the operations teams are going to use those other subscriptions on there. So let's dig into a subscription. A subscription can have multiple things. You'll find I'm very technical, okay? I use the words stuff and things and stuff like that. So, there you go. Subscription ID. So for each subscription, you can have a bunch of stuff. So for Windows Azure, you can have compute, you can have storage accounts, you can create things on the CDN, you can set up the network, You can create databases in SQL Azure and servers. You can set up reporting. You can do some of the other things in an app fabric, configure the service bus and things. But it's this subscription ID that's going to do those kind of jobs, okay? Now, management. Because remember, we're all about managing Windows Azure apps. So I'm not going to show you how to build one. A couple of ways we can do this. First way is the easiest way, and it's the way where you're going to learn how to do things and what you can do. And it's through what we call the Windows Azure portal, or the Windows Azure platform portal. I get mixed up. But basically, you're going to log on with your Windows Live ID over HTTPS. We put the S on the new line just to show that it's important that we encrypt it. The other way of doing it is actually through an API. Again, put the S on the bottom just to make sure it's good. Now, in order to use the API, you do need a certificate. And you create this certificate. You can create it in IIS, or you can use MakeCert to create it. Once you've created that certificate, you'll upload that to the portal. And then once it's in the portal, you'll be able to use the API to deploy applications, to get diagnostics information, yada, yada, yada. Okay? And that allows you, okay, so time out a little bit. We've done an incredibly great job of building an API for this. We've done an incredibly good job of giving you a web portal, and that's where we stopped. So, cool. Now, we do have some Windows PowerShell commandlets, and they use the management API. So to do that, you use the certificate, okay? And we'll see a little bit later how we plug that together. Now, what's great about using PowerShell is you can script deployments and configurations and things like that. But you're going to learn how to do it through the portal. Now, which way you do it, the way you go and communicate with a thing called the Fabric Controller. It's one of those words that kind of were internal, and then we thought it sounded really cool, so we told everybody about it. And it really doesn't make a lot of sense to anybody. But it's the kind of magic glue. It's the software that runs Windows Azure. And we need to communicate with that. So it's going to do all the jobs. When you deploy an app to the portal, nobody runs around copying files and stuff. It's all automated. The Fabric Controller takes care of that. It goes and communicates securely with our data centers and deploys your application, creates your storage accounts, does wherever it needs to go and do. And your app runs inside what we call a guest VM. And this is important because you need to understand what's in a guest VM if you're going to manage it. Okay? So, before we go any further, let's go and take a look at the portal. And I'm actually going to deploy an app. Now, the reason I'm going to deploy an app now, before I talk about deployment and things, is I need it to deploy so we can do stuff to it. And if I wait until the end and then deploy it, we'll all have to sit around for 15 minutes while it deploys, and that doesn't make for a particularly good talk. Well, it does if you're me, but hey. So, we're in... Ta-da! This one here, and... I'm just gonna flip the res a little bit because we want it full screen. So I'm going to show you a real cool trick here. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, I've done this before. Okay, so we don't want that. We want this. So I'm going to sign into the portal. Now, when I sign into the portal, I'm going to use my Microsoft credentials to do it. So we've got a special kind of backdoor into the portal. But once we get there, it looks exactly the same as what you would get. So I'm going to log in. It's going to take me to a different site so I can log in. This is the one place where I don't want my password to kind of show up on the screen. And once I get in, it's going to load a Silverlight portal. And it looks like this. Fantastic. So what I'm going to do is, real quick, kind of, I own lots of subscriptions. Let's have a look at those subscriptions, because it's going to kind of clutter the screen a little bit. If I go into hosted services, this is how we kind of define compute. You see that it's kind of busy already. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. So actually what I want to do is I'm going to deploy a new application, but I've got a different team that's going to be looking after it. So I'm going to create a core admin just for that project. So let's go into user management. And you can see here that there's only one user, and I've got a bunch of subscriptions, and therefore a bunch of projects associated with it. So I'm going to create a new co-admin, and here I have to put a live ID in, right? We don't yet do any federation with your directory, so you've got to have live IDs to do this. And I'm going to use the monitor demo. So I'm going to click on OK. It's going to create basically an entry, and it'll take a few seconds to refresh, but there's my new administrator added in. So now I should be able to sign out of the portal, and fingers crossed, sign in. And go on here. And yep, we're in the right place. So now when I go on hosted servers, I only see the project that I've just been given permission to. So I'm a new admin to this. Now what I recommend is for each production application, you have a subscription for it. Don't put multiple apps in the same subscription. It just gets all funny, especially when you're trying to do your billing and work all that out, okay? Also, your production live ID doesn't need to be a person. You could create a special live ID for it, and that's recommended. And also, you don't want your devs to have that account. Because do you really want them pushing to production? No, okay? And I apologize to all the devs in the room. I'm going to be really rude to you throughout this talk, and I make no apologies because I'm a dev, and hey. So here we've got I've already created a service, but I haven't got anything deployed. And the reason why I've created the service is because I really like the DNS name that I wanted, and that is Div TechEd. And I didn't want anybody to steal it, so I already created it. I've also set up some storage accounts, and I'm going to talk about these as we go through. But let's get this deployment underway, otherwise we're going to run out of time, and we won't have deployed anything. So, live demo. There's asking for trouble. So, my devs have handed me a deployment, and it's two files. There's one file which is basically a zip file of everything, and which is this. This is the Windows Azure package. And then there's a config file, and that config file has got all the connection information about storage accounts and things like that in. We'll dig into those in a little bit, but we've got to get this deployment going. Now, I've got a warning, and I'm going to click on yes, and I'm going to explain what the warning is. I have a web role that only has one instance. And to get an SLA, I need to have two instances, okay? So, that's why I've got the warning, so we give you a little hint there on that. I have one web instance, so it reminds me that I've got to tell you that you need two to go. I wouldn't normally do that. Okay, so that's deploying an application. I've done it through the portal, it uploads two files, and it's going to create all the VLANs and wire up the load balancer and create the guest VMs and everything like that. While that's happening, we're not going to wait until it finishes. We're going to flip across back to the deck, and we'll talk about that, what's inside that application. So we've got the concept of services, roles, and instances. So services, what I've just deployed, it contains some roles. It could contain a web role, which is basically something with IIS running. It could contain a worker role, which is basically something that doesn't have IIS running. How clever do we distinguish between those? And then it could also be a VM role. Now, a VM role is kind of weird. It's kind of like the naughty child of Windows Azure. We keep them locked in the cupboard. We don't let them out very often. But it allows you to build an operating system and basically deploy that. It's not infrastructure as a service. It's when you need to deploy some complicated stuff and you like to set up the whole thing yourself. A service could be made up out of multiple roles of each type as well. Now, when you deploy it, what happens is you say, hey, you know what? For each of these roles, I'd like to have X number of instances. And you can have different numbers of instances for each of the roles in your service. And we'll deploy them together. We'll upgrade them together. We'll make sure they're deployed across different fault domains and so on. Now, the thing it runs on is called the guest VM or guest OS. And basically what we do is quite easy. We create a brand new Windows Server 2008 or 2008 R2 instance for you. We pull that basically from our repository, and we go and deploy your application. So we unzip that file and we go and put it on the E drive. And then we go and, based on your configuration, that you give us, do a bit of config, and then start the thing up. Within there, we've also got a guest agent as well, and that's what we use to communicate with your app. And that's what starts your app as well. Finally, the operating system, you can have it automatically update. So when we do Patch Tuesday kind of security fixes, you can have them automatically applied. And the way we do this is we go and apply them in the source control, and then we redeploy your service. We don't patch anything while it's running. We just deploy a new OS and deploy your service again. It's pretty neat. Sometimes you might go, ooh, don't want that to happen. You can choose manual updates as well. So, we're just going to flip real quick back onto here. I'll keep doing this until it deploys. Basically, what's happening is we've got the app created. You can see I've got two things here, which is called worker test, instance 0 and instance 1. And I've also got a thing called load UI, which is instance 0, and it's just starting up there. So it's going to take a few minutes for this app to start up. Now, when it starts up, we'll be able to navigate to it. And at some point, I'm going to get the people in the audience with laptops or Android tablets to connect to that URL and click on the button, just to kind of kickstart the app doing something. But not yet, because I want to do a few things. And I have to actually wait until this finishes before we can do the next thing. But hopefully I've got the right number of slides between then and now to get there. And if we haven't, we'll tell some jokes. So now what? Here's all the questions that I get. Hey, Dave, we've just deployed a Windows Azure application. How many instances should we have? And I go, I don't know. And they go, well, neither do we. So I say, 100. And they go, but it's only web app. We've only got 5,000 users. And I go, 200 then. And they go, Dave, stop it. Your kids aren't going to the next 20, 30 minutes or so, 57 minutes and some seconds. We're going to walk you through how to get the answers to these kind of questions and some more, and give you some visibility into what your application is going to be doing up there. Okay. So that takes us on to part 2. So we've got our application deployed. We've got a web role. We've got a couple of worker roles. We're going to hit it in a few minutes. We're going to generate some traffic on there. What my app does is amazing. When you click on the button, it puts 1,000 messages in a queue. And then the worker role reads the message from the queue, and it calculates pi to about 50,000 digits. And then it does nothing. It kind of goes and reads the next message in the queue. So the idea is that once you click the button, we're going to peg the CPU in that role at 100%. Okay? So then we go, ooh, hey, everything's at 100%. We need more instances, so we'll deploy some more instances. So here's my question, or here's your question, really. I want to find out what's going on inside my service. It's a reasonable request. It's pretty much what everything else boils down to. So I have a 3-part plan, because we love 3-part plans at Microsoft. And I was interested to find that pink was a good color inside the deck. So I thought, let's use it. So enable diagnostics, that's the first thing we've got to do. Who's used diagnostics before? Corey, you're not allowed to, or Bill, you're not allowed to put your hand up. Come on. So a couple of people have used diagnostics. Ooh, okay. We've got to turn something on. That's the kind of point. The next thing we've got to do is we've got to configure something, this diagnostics thing. And then the last thing, we've got to go and view the data. So what does enable diagnostics really mean? Well, when we deploy you into this guest VM, this guest OS, it's a Windows server. And if you're familiar with Windows Server, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can use for management. We've got some event logs. We've got a system log, an application log. We've got some performance counters for doing CPU processing, ASP.NET requests, and about a zillion other things. We've got a bunch of trace logs that might be created by the developer. We've got some IIS logs that we might want to kind of have a look at as well. So one idea is, why couldn't we connect up to each one of these things that we've got deployed and just suck down the data as we do that? So here's the challenge. It's not in your data center. It's in mine. So, and we only like to open the ports that your service needs to run. So if it's a website, you'll say, hey, I'd like port 80 open. That's what we open. If you want to kind of manage it, then you've got to start opening up WMI ports and a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, that to me is just, hey, Mr. Hacker, I've got some vulnerabilities now. Would you like to try and exploit them? So we want to kind of lock that down. Now, you can use a virtual network technology we have called Windows Azure Connect, and that can help you do that. But there's an even simpler way. Built into Windows Azure is the ability to collect all of that information, all that goodness from inside a server, and then put it into Windows Azure storage. So we've got this little agent called the diagnostics agent that collects all the perf counter stuff and then shoves it down into storage. So the first thing we've got to do is go and create a storage account so that we've got somewhere to put this data. So you can imagine deploying an app with 100 instances. All of these 100 instances are going to feed their diagnostics, their perf counter data, event logs into this one little pot of goodness that we can then go and run queries against and things like that. Well, we would if we give you any tools to do it, by the way. We'll get to that, though. Yeah, those that done it are laughing at that point. It's hilarious. Okay, so what's the developer got to do? So this is something that the dev has to do. They have to do two very simple things. They have to basically add the diagnostics import, which looks exactly like that. That's the sum total of it. And then they have to add a diagnostics connection string. I do not want the dev to do anything else. The dev will be like, no, I can use the API and decide which perf counters we need. And this is what happens. I regularly work with a lot of dev shops and things and building out stuff, and the devs are awesome. Can't fault them, except they think reading a perf counter every 5 seconds is a good idea. Now, it might be when you're testing your app, but when it's in production, every 5 seconds means you're going to get a whole bunch of data from your 100 instances every 5 seconds storing in the thing. You're actually going to bottleneck the storage service at some point because you're going to try and put more perf counters in. Typical dev likes to deploy about 100 perf counters with their app as well. So we don't want them to do anything. That's all we want them to do. So let me quickly show you what that looks like, because I've got a slide that says I've got to do a demo. I've got lots of demos here. I thought I would do it rather than just talk about it. So I'm going to load up Visual Studio. And I'm going to load my project in that we've just deployed. I'm not going to look at any kind of fun code or anything like that, which might be a little bit distressing. I'm going to load Visual Studio, and it's going to load. I have a VM running, so it might take a second to load up. Here we go. And load the project in. Now, the devs are always like, oh, man, you always get me to do things. It's really hard. We've got enough things to do. All the devs are like, dude, you do my voice really good. So this is where we do it. Here, there's a little tick box that says Enable Diagnostics. That's what they've got to do. They click on that, and we even put that bit of code in for them. And then they need to pick a connection string. And they can just leave it alone. They don't have to do anything, because we're going to change it anyway, because they'll have picked the wrong thing. And if your devs can't do that, you'll want to question whether they need to be employed by you. Okay? So that's easy done. Look, we've got a couple of things ready already on our service. We're almost at the point where we can do something useful. So I'd already done that before I deployed. Otherwise, this session becomes a 2-hour session on there. So next. So we've turned diagnostics on, but it's doing absolutely nothing. Okay? So we need to tell it to go and do whatever it is that we needed to get it to do. So we need to get it some perf counters. Why do we need to get it to give us some perf counters? Well, earlier we had a question, how do you know how many instances you want to run? Well, you could do with knowing how much load you've got on all of your instances that are running. The way you do that is you go and grab some perf counters. By the way, all of this now it's just Windows. So if we already know how to capacity plan on Windows, we already know how to look at performance on Windows, we already know how to do it in Windows Azure, and it's real easy. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to tell the diagnostics agent what to collect. Now, Windows Azure provides an API to do that. Awesome. It is clearly almost, and I'm being recorded and I don't care, but it is clearly the biggest, stupidest thing we've ever done on any of this is like, hey, look, here's an API. And then the IT pro looks at you and goes, and you want me to do what with it? Can I load that up and have a nice graph of my perf counters? Can I go and search through my error logs or anything like that? Of course not. It's an API. You can write some code against it. So we did. So the evangelism team put together a bunch of stuff. We've got a set of Windows PowerShell commandlets because we all love PowerShell, don't we? And if you don't, then we need to talk after this session. We also built an MMC because we could. So we're going to show you how to use that. And then we've got some third-party tools. I'm actually going to show you some third-party tools as well that have done a good job of doing this. I'm also going to talk about System Center a little bit later because actually if you're an enterprise and you're deploying apps to the cloud and you already have System Center, it's a great thing just to go and plug in real easy and start getting this collected for you. So, it's still starting the host. I need to deploy by now or I need to talk slower. So, let's go and jump into this. So I'm going to use a PowerShell script to actually go and set all my configuration up. So I'm going to open up PowerShell. And the font's really small. I'm going to load the thing up in Notepad and make the font bigger so you can kind of see it, right? And the script's about 60 lines long. So then I decided, you're probably not going to try and write it down. So I thought I'd blog about it. Not right yet because I'm busy talking, but I'll get there. So I'm going to go into my script. I'm going to type Notepad, and I've got a wee PowerShell script. And it should load up Notepad, obviously. Control plus. Tell me when you can see it. I forgot to set the default. Control and mouse wheel. Woohoo! Look at how cool that is. Okay. If you're real quick, you'll have copied down my storage key and now be depositing huge quantities of illegal material into my storage account. So what I've got here is basically a thumbnail. Remember when I said the management API needed a certificate? Well, I've got the certificate installed. I've put the certificate up in the management portal. That's the thumbnail so I can find it. And I go and grab the management certificate, so I've got it ready to sign. Then I've got a subscription ID. So remember, I've got a subscription to Windows Azure. It has an ID. The ID for that actually is on the portal, and you can pretty much click anywhere and find the subscription ID. So that's the subscription ID down there. Hurry up and start, please. If not, we're going to have to switch to Plan B, which gets interesting. Where was I? Notepad. The next thing I've got is what the storage account name is that I'm going to put my diagnostic stuff in. So the real bright ones will have noticed that says load test diag, and that's actually what that click box had said on there as well. And then I have a storage account key. Note to self, change the storage account key, because when you're watching the video, you'll have time to write it down, okay? So someone's already, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it. So this is the secret key that I need to connect to storage. Then I've got the name of the service, which was David Techhead, makes it right, nice. So that's just some data I'm collecting. The next thing I go and do is I go and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to collect the logs, application system. I'm going to set up some default times for collecting counters, which is going to be 5 minutes, and a default transfer period. What happens is we're going to collect the perf counters every 5 minutes, and then every 5 minutes we're going to transfer them out to storage. So that's what the two numbers are. And you can change them independently. And then basically I've got create a counter. This one's for processing time, CPU. And I go and create a bunch of them. I've commented some out that I'm not using today. And then I go and basically get a deployment. Now what I'm doing here is I'm getting the deployment with the name that I set up at the top, and then I enumerate through all of the instances that are running, and then I go and set all of the different configuration I need. So I'm going to set, hey, I want some logs, and basically specify some parameters. Again, I'm not going to walk through all this, it'll be on my blog. Then I go and say, hey, you know, I've got the Windows Azure log, I've got a Windows event log, I'm going to grab the infrastructure logs and the perf counters as well as the file-based logs as well. So I'm going to get the IIS logs and wherever else like that. Now this script, to run it against different deployments, all I need to do really is find my mouse and change this information at the top. So you can download this script probably tomorrow sometime, maybe over the weekend, we'll see. And then run that script against your deployment, and so long as you've turned diagnostics on, it will start collecting the correct information. So we're going to run this script, but we can only run it if our app is finished deploying. Okay, this is Plan C. So we've got basically a node that's failed. And this sometimes happens even when there's nothing wrong with your deployment, right? What's going to happen now is we're going to try and redeploy it. And something just went wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that your code's bad or your service is bad. Sometimes you'll try and deploy, and it will just barf on you really badly. I hate it when it does it in the middle of a demo. So we're not going to run that script against that one. Instead, we might switch to Plan B, which is an app that I've already got deployed and running, so that we didn't stand around waiting for this to finish. But we'll come back to this and see if it gets going. I will run the script. We're going to get an error, okay? Because not everything is running up there. But we're going to run it anyway, and it might crank through. It might actually work, but it's probably going to give us an error at some point because it's going to try and do some comms with something that's there, and it might even work. It's totally underwhelming when it does work because all it does is it returns back to the prompt. So it might not even be worth waiting for it to finish. We'll leave it running, though, and see if it... Oh, there, look, it returned back to the prompt. Ta-da. Anyway, yay, thank you. So anyway, I thought I would show you what's going on when we run that script. Essentially what happens is in this load test diag, it goes and creates a container which called WAD control container, because we love our names. And inside there, it creates a bunch of things, and whatever the latest deployment is, and I'm guessing it's that one, it's going to create a folder, and basically it creates a little XML document that says, collect this perf counters, collect these events logs. And then the diagnostics agent reads that in, and that's what it collects. And you can go in and just edit the XML file, but you'll find it easier running a PowerShell script to go and do it than do that, especially when you're working with like half a dozen instances. But I wanted to show you that bit. Now, when the data is being collected, what you'll find is it does a few things. First of all, it goes and creates this WAD IIS logs file, and in there, basically will be your IIS logs. And here's some that I've collected from previous deployments. Okay? I sat and tested my demo a whole bunch this week, and it never ever bombed out like that, I tell you. But I thought it might, so I've got another app already deployed. It also creates a bunch of tables, and inside those tables is a table called WAD performance counters table. And if I go into there, there's some perf counters. Now, according to our dev team, hey, the data's in Windows Azure Storage, what more would you like? So I don't know about you, but from a kind of capacity planning kind of aspect, that's not really cutting it for me. Now, you can export it to Excel and do stuff with it, but we're going to have a look at a few different things instead. So let's flip back to the slides. So we've configured our diagnostics. So now we've got this data starting to be collected. We need to kind of look at it and figure out what's going on. Okay? Now, if you want to know how to tune a web server or things like that, we've got a bunch of resources on TechNet for different versions of IIS. Any one of them actually works for you. It gives you a bunch of counters that you might want to turn on and suggests some log things that you might want to collect. You could just go and implement that on your Windows Azure site. So the data's in the table of the blob storage. We took a look at that. There's a few tools that we can use to go and view this data. Right? So at this point, there's a kind of little decision tree. I can go and build my own tool against table storage, blob storage, if I want to. I could go and use the Windows Azure MMC, which just got updated this week, so I had to add it back into my talk because it was broken for a while. Another choice is System Center Operations Manager. If you put cumulative update 3 or above on, you will get the Windows Azure stuff, and you'll have to download the management pack from Pinpoint as well. Those that know about System Center will know what I've said. Those that don't, it doesn't really matter. And there's also a bunch of third-party tools as well. So I'm going to walk you through the MMC and the third-party tools now, and then we'll take a kind of 5-minute break or something, and we'll come back and I'm funning about the break. We'll come back and we'll have a look at the Operations Manager thing as well. So, back to here. Now let's see if our deployment has worked. Yes. Fantastic. Needn't deploy me, deployed the Fabric controller, I guess. So I'm going to load the app up just to show you, and I do need somebody to click on it. I'll click on it as well, just to kind of thing. It is the most advanced UI known to humankind. It is Silverlight 10. I'm clicking on the button. Silverlight 10, I know, it's funny. I click on the button, and it goes and puts some messages in the queue. It gives me no feedback whatsoever that it's finished, other than it will not hang up. And eventually, in about 20 seconds or so, the queue length should change to something else. While that's going on, we can actually go and look in the queue in the table. So that's the diagnostics, but this is the actual apps thing. And you can see I've got a queue aptly named Sooty from the Puppets Sooty and Sweep. Bit of nostalgia for you. And basically, we've got 1,209 messages in there. So what's going to happen now is both my workers are now pulling messages off and calculating pi to an obscene amount of digits, which basically is going to peg the CPU at 100%. So hopefully we'll see that when we're looking at the data. We'll see the CPU drifting along at 100. Otherwise, what happens is you see everything drifting along at 0, and it looks lame. So the first thing I'm going to do is load up the MMC console. And I'm going to add in, where's the console? Here we are. I'm going to add in the Windows Azure Management Console, which you have to download, obviously. And here we are. And then the first thing you've got to do when you use this is go into Service Management and say, hey, look, my subscription ID is this. And you also need to pick the certificate again so it can talk to the Management API. So this certificate is kind of like really useful. So when you build it, when you create the certificate, and you can use IIS to generate a self-signed certificate, or you can use Make Cert, and you upload to the portal. What you want to do is also export it with the key, and then you can go and use it on several machines without having to manage a whole bunch of different keys. The key we generate is a 2048-bit key, just in case you were interested. So when I expand this out, I should have hosted services for this, and I should get my whatever it was called, Dave Tech Ed thing there. I've got staging and production slots. Did I talk about that? I didn't, no. So production has a real DNS name, something like techeddavid.cloudapp.net. Staging has GUID.cloudapp.net. And I don't mean the word GUID, I mean actual GUID.cloudapp.net. And you can use it for when you want to swap one deployment with another real quick. And we just quickly change the load balancer. Anyway, we're going to go into production. Here's our stuff running. We'll just expand those out. We'll see, we might see the instances. I forget how they do this. This is the configuration. Follow me. You can actually edit the configuration here. And we've even got commands to say increase worker, decrease worker as well. So if you want a nice, easy, painless way to scaling up and scaling down, you can use the MMC to do that in the whole world. So remember, all of the diagnostics goes into storage. So you don't actually need the management API to read all of your performance data out. You just need a storage account. So this is why this screen says, hey, you know, even though we could probably have figured out what your connection string is, we'll still make you choose it.